folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio with a new project for the On30 Thunder Mesa Mining Company layout. That's right, the move is over and it's time to get back to making models. And what I want to make today is basically a prototype for some excursion cars to run on the Reimagined Thunder Mesa layout. This isn't actually a new idea, but one I've been kicking around in the back of my head for a long time. For one reason or another, the project kept getting put off, and most recently because of the big move. But now the wait is over and I am going to build that excursion car prototype. My first attempt at a Thunder Mesa excursion car is this little 14-foot car here. I built this about probably 8 to 10 years ago. I can't really remember. It's built on top of a 14-foot flat car, and the design is basically meant to evoke the ride vehicles on Big Thunder Mountain at Disneyland and Disney World. Very happy with this car, but for one reason or another, I never went back and built more of them. Maybe I will one of these days. More recently, I acquired a few of these Bachmann open excursion cars. I painted them and added decals and figures and all that, but they don't quite have the right character for Thunder Mesa, in my opinion. So they never really satisfied me 100%. Maybe they'll end up over on the Goldfield and Calico at some point because, you know, they just look a little bit modern for the Thunder Mesa Mining Company. Now, if you're not familiar with the lore of Thunder Mesa, you might be wondering why a mining railroad would need excursion cars in the first place. Well, for one thing, excursion cars are cool. And for another, after 1906, the area around Thunder Mesa became known as Nature's Wonderland National Monument, as proclaimed by none other than Theodore Roosevelt. So lots of tourists started to flock to the area to see the natural wonders, to see Old Unfaithful Geyser and Rainbow Caverns and the Balancing Rocks and things like that. And so the railroad thought it would be a good idea to take advantage of this and start running excursion trains so that the people visiting could see all of these wonders. And in the end, that became a very important revenue stream for the railroad. So for this new prototype excursion car, I want something that's, you know, sort of diminutive and theme park-like, but still plausible. Now, you might remember my Gruesome Gulch railroad project. I built a couple of excursion cars for that, and I've always wanted to go back and revisit that design and maybe tweak it a little bit for the Thunder Mesa Mining Company. For those Gruesome Gulch cars, I used Roundhouse Products HO Scale Overton Shorty coach as a starting point. I really love doing stuff like this because it goes back to the roots of On30, finding stuff in HO scale and converting it to On30 scale. I just happen to have a whole bunch of these Overton kits. Some were given to me, some I picked up on eBay and other places over the years, but they are ubiquitous. You can find them everywhere. There's probably thousands of them out there on the resale market, and for a lot of people, this was their very first rolling stock kit. So this is going to look familiar to a lot of you. So let's just get started by opening up the box here. Make sure we've got a complete kit to work with. Sometimes you pick these up used and there might be parts missing. This is looks like a Southern Pacific New Orleans business car. That'll work. Basically what we're going to be using out of this is the clear story roof, the frame, and probably the trucks. But other than that, we're not going to be using the whole kit. And we'll be replacing these couplers with probably some KD number 5s. Now, if you want a good laugh, you can go back and watch my Gruesome Gulch videos where I built some excursion cars, and you can hear me mispronounce words like clear story and Delrin. But other than that, the cars turned out pretty good. So the first thing I want to do is start to prepare this frame, and I need to cut off these HO scale steps. So I'll just take my razor saw, cut right down through these steps. Nice thing is this is really soft plastic on here, so they're quite easy to work with. A lot of people ask me about this saw. You can pick these up over on micromark.com. Both the blades and the handles. I highly recommend this tool. getting rid of the HO steps because, well, those are kind of a dead giveaway in an O-scale model. Just cutting right up at the top of the steps, right where they meet the body. Sharp number 11 blade in your hobby knife is also a great thing to have. Next, I want to cut off the end beams on each side. Now, this is a business car or an observation coach, so this is the only one where the frame is different. On the combines and the coaches and everything, it's all the same, but this has a larger end beam on it. But you just need to cut that off just like on the other frames. Now, when I say I'm prototyping this car, what I mean by that is, well, I'm working out all the kinks. I'm getting it figured out. You know, solving all the problems before I build several of these. I want to have probably 4 or 5 total, maybe even more than that. Maybe have a couple of different trains of these. So I'll figure out all the problems first that might come up in the build, and then I can, you know, build them 2 or 3 at a time after that. You know, using my sanding block and some sandpaper taped to a piece of glass around and square off all 4 sides. Make sure I've got a nice flat surface to work with. Now I need to cut a couple of new end beams out of some 4x6 material. And these are 1 9/32 of an inch long. I also need to bulk out the sides of the frame a little bit. So I'm going to add a 2x4 to each side using a little cyanoacrylate here. And I've cut this longer than I need it to be. So I can just get it on here and then trim it to length. Now I can just mark where the end sill, the end beam is going to overlap that, and cut it off right there. And this will ensure that the end beam and these side rails are all nice and square and the right length. Add another one to the other side, same thing. Now we trim 1 inch to length. I should be able to add this end beam. Before I glue this end beam on here, I want to mark where the coupler pocket is and file that out a little bit. So cut straight down, just a 32nd of an inch is all I really need here. Do a little whittling, and take the flat file, square that up. Just a tiny little notch. Now that gets glued right onto the end. I want the top of the beam to be flush with the top of the plastic. Okay, now we do the other side. Same thing. Now I've cut some O-scale 1x8s to add some decking to the end platforms. Same width as the end beam. So it goes all the way over and overlaps that 2x4. And this will cover up that those holes left behind when we cut off the HO scale steps. Now, following the instructions on the kit, go back and add the brake cylinder and then the queen posts for the truss rods. And those just glue right down into these holes, just as if you were building the HO kit. And then I want to add the truss rods, and I'm going to do it just the way it says to do it in the kit, with some black string that's provided. It's really quite effective when it's done right. You can substitute wire if you like, but this actually works quite well. I put a little dab of CA on the ends of the queen post, basically everywhere that the string touches the plastic, and that way you get a nice tight truss rods, no sag, unless you want saggy truss rods. I mean, that's a thing. It's Thread that back through the hole, like that. And then I like to put a little dab of CA there. You can kick that with a little baking soda. Makes it set up faster, makes for a stronger joint. Back down through this hole. Just like sewing, except with glue. If you've ever rigged a ship model, this is a similar process. There we go. Truss rods. You know, sometimes the old school solutions are still the best. Still works. Now it's time to add the weights, and I like to rough up the surface of these with some sandpaper, give the glue something to stick to. I'm going to use some 5-minute epoxy to glue these weights on. It's about the only thing I've found that's reliable. 100%. Other glues will dry out, and you know, and then the weights will come loose inside the car, and you'll hear them rattling around in there. This is a 50-50 mix, so pretty easy. Smear some of it on the weight. I want that positioned right over that hole. I should probably be wearing gloves for this. Kids, do as I say, not as I do. Wear gloves. While I wait for that epoxy to set up, I'm going to go ahead and cut the floor out of this car, because we're going to need it. The way these cars are designed, the trucks screw into these posts right there, and these posts go down through those holes. So I need the floor from this car, but nothing else. This is going to be hidden inside of the car, so it doesn't have to be, you know, pretty, just functional. Now I'll just make another small batch of epoxy, and we'll use that to glue this on top of this. Just lining up the holes here. And I'll put a little weight on that. Now I've gone back to the original laser cut file that I created for the Gruesome Gulch Excursion cars, and made a couple of changes to make them more Thunder Mesa-y. First, I'm using a different material. On the Gruesome Gulch cars, I used some 25 1/1000th of an inch thick laser board, and this is some 35 1/1000th of an inch thick laser board. So it's a little bit thicker because I wanted a kind of a chunkier look to these. And I've also changed the way the seats are supported. I've given them this little angled brace, which of course is a callback to the Big Thunder Mountain cars. Now I'll just use some yellow carpenter's glue to put these sides together. Another reason for using the thicker laser board, besides the chunkier look that I want, is for strength. On the Gruesome Gulch cars, I used 25 thou laser board, and that worked fine, but I ended up needing to support the roof and the interior with some 4x6 posts. For this, I don't think I'm going to need to do that. This should be plenty strong enough on its own. And then, of course, the other side is basically just a mirror image. Toothpick is handy, by the way, for getting glue out of little corners like this. You get a little too much glue, get a little too rambunctious with the glue, which does happen sometimes. Hardest thing about this, of course, is making sure that everything lines up perfectly. That's why you want to glue like carpenter's glue with a little bit of working time, because you might need to move things around. At least I do. I don't know about you, but I always have to move things around. Never get it right the first time. And then I've got these scalloped trim pieces, and those I did cut out of some 25 1/1000th laser board. And that's because I don't want the the edges here to stick out too far beyond the edge of the roof, or at all beyond the edge of the roof. Well, now I'm ready to get some paint on the frame and the trucks and the other hardware, and for that I'm going to use some Rust-Oleum dark brown camo. Well, now I can finish the car body. And once again, I've got some laser cut pieces for the ends, pretty similar to the Gruesome Gulch coaches. Once again, though, thicker material, and I've changed the way it goes together a little bit, so it's a little bit easier of an assembly, because this is going to overlap this edge right here and form a nice strong joint. Make sure everything is going together as square as I can make it. The design of these cars, by the way, is inspired by some Jackson and Sharp Excursion cars that date back to the turn of the century, 19th to 20th, by the way. Got to be specific on that. And the difference being that on the Jackson and Sharp cars, these bench seats were reversible. You could flip the backs over to the other side, so the seats would always be facing forward, regardless of the direction of travel. These cars are a little shorter, space is a little tight, so didn't have that option, but I wanted to evoke the kind of feel of those cars nonetheless. So kind of a hybrid design between the Jackson and Sharp cars and the Big Thunder Mountain ride vehicles, which, if you look close at them, they're supposed to look like ore cars that have been converted to carry passengers. They don't pull that off very well, but that's because the ride's a roller coaster. You got to have certain standards, certain kinds of restraints and things like that. The cars that Knott's Berry Farm uses on its Calico Mine Ride are much better representation of that idea, which is an ore car that's been converted to carry passengers. Also, the old Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland cars were a little bit better that way. And these are going to be painted similarly to the Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland cars, so we're going to evoke a little bit of that also. And the way I arrived at the dimensions of these cars was basically I started with the roof, and so that gave me the maximum width and length, and then I scaled up the height so that O-scale passengers could get in and out. Now that these corners are dry, I'm going to take a little bit of this Elmer's wood putty and just run it along this joint here. Fill in any gaps that might be left over. Just filling in that seam. And after this dries for a minute, I'll just come back and sand it smooth. We should have some nice clean edges then. Well, tricks of the trade. Okay, let's see how the roof fits. Should just pop in there. Just like that. Not bad. I think we're about ready to get some paint on this car body. And the color I've chosen for the cars is this Rust-Oleum kind of sunny yellow, an ultra matte finish. Oh, and I also need to paint these hangers for the side steps the same color. Well, while I'm painting, I figured I might as well go ahead and get some color on the rest of this stuff. For the roof and the benches, I'm going to paint these kind of a red oxide. And then I've got some end rails for the platforms, and these are the side steps for getting in and out of the car. I'm going to paint those a flat black. I'm putting a new sharp number 11 blade in my hobby knife because now I want to cut out these letter boards that I created for the car. Did these in Affinity Photo 2, which is very similar to Adobe Photoshop. It's my new go-to graphic design program. And I printed these out at the highest possible resolution on my home desktop printer using some HP Premium presentation paper. Just about any home desktop printer will give you good results, but the key is to use the right paper and the right settings. The idea here is once these are cut out, this will just overlay on top of the existing letterboard that's on there. And the letterboards say Thunder Mesa Scenic Railroad rather than Thunder Mesa Mining Company. And the idea there is that, once they started to do more excursion traffic and there was a high demand for it, they formed a subsidiary business just for that, with the name Thunder Mesa Scenic Railroad, so to distinguish it from the mining company. That's the way it all works out in my head anyway. It's always important when using any kind of printed paper graphics to paint the edges of the paper so that white won't show. And I'm using some Vallejo olive green for that. It's a good match for what I have printed here. You paint from the back, so when your brush slips, like it inevitably does, it goes on the back of the paper, not on the front. Really, the trickiest thing about using this printed paper technique, other than cutting things out, is trying to match the printed color. My best advice is to go darker, go a shade darker. You can't go wrong by going a shade darker than the printed color. It'll look right. Now that yellow has had a chance to dry, the next step is to go in and brush paint these letterboards with the same Vallejo olive green that I used to paint the edges of the paper signs. That way everything will match up nicely. It's probably going to take a couple of coats. Now I'm going to paint some white glue on the back of these paper signs. Make sure I get it all the way out to the edges. Start down at this end. Just glue it into place. Flip it over. Same thing on the other side. Now I need to add the bench seats, and I've taken these little pieces of 25 thou laser board and attached an 8x8 to the bottom to give them a little bit of bracing. I should be able to just slide these in. I'm going to start with the rearmost seat. There's little slots here to help line these up. I want to put these benches in now because you might notice the car kind of bows a little bit towards the middle. That's normal with this kind of material, but I want it to be square and straight, so these 8x8s under the bench are going to push those sides out and make it nice and square for when I put it onto the frame in the next step. Next come the seat backs. Just putting a little glue on those edges. And I can just drop that right in there in between those uprights. Just like that. It's starting to look like a car now. Now I cut a floor for it out of some 1/32 of an inch thick basswood. Before I glue it in, I want to stain it. This is Minwax Early American stain marker. I'm going to put some Eileen's tacky glue right on top of this. Remember, this was the plastic floor from the Roundhouse car. Spread that out a little bit. And I can glue this new wooden floor right on top of that. All that's still workable. I'll put my car body on here. Make sure it's correctly positioned. Now I want to do some work on the clear story roof, starting by cutting a couple of strips of clear acrylic. The kit doesn't come with any kind of glazing to go in there, so you've got to make your own. And this is just some clear plastic that I saved from, looks like some kind of packaging, probably some electronics packaging. You need a couple of pieces, about 3/16 wide by 4 1/8 inch long. I want the glazing to be fogged like decorative glass, so I'm using some 800 grit sandpaper here, just kind of swirling it on the back. You know, this side will be out, this will be shiny, but the inside will be fogged like that. You want to use a real fine grit sandpaper for this. Otherwise, rather than fogged, it'll just look scratched. The best thing I've ever found for applying any kind of glazing like this is this Zap canopy glue. I like to apply it with a brush to the inside. Make sure I get that shiny side out. In we go. So just a couple of minutes work, and it's a vast improvement on how that clear story roof is going to look once it's on the car. Now for the moment of truth, I am ready to glue the body onto the frame. So the body is going to be glued to the frame, but the roof will remain removable, so I can, add passengers and things and access the inside of the car. Now I've set up my little miter box here with a stop because I need to cut some little steps, 4 for each side, and I would like them all to be the same. And these get glued into these openings here to hide that plastic subfloor under there and, provide a nice finished look. I think I can go ahead and put these end rails on. Now with that glued into place, I want to drill out these holes. Got a number 72 bit in my twist drill. Just need to go in a little ways here because I'm going to add some nut bolt washer castings. These are some Grant Line number 66 nut bolt washer castings. These are pretty small. I was taking with my tweezers, and I've got a little drop of CA here in my glue dish. Put that on the end and push them down into the hole. And when it's all done, it's going to look like that. Now I just need to flip it over and do the other side. Also want to add these side steps. A distinctive detail of this type of excursion car where you board, directly from the platform into your seat rather than, going down an aisle like a traditional car. And these are made up of 2 pieces. You've got the hanger and then the step itself. This just slots into that. And then those get glued right to the side of the frame. And once again, we drill some holes and add some nut bolt washer castings. And once again, we flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. Now I want to add a couple of brake wheels, one at each end. And I'm going to use the Use the ones from the kit. I mean, they're HO scale, so they're a little small, but it's a small car. Just using some music wire for the stave there. Now I'll go ahead and paint these flat black. Now I need to drill a couple of holes over here on the right-hand side of the platform, right behind the railings. Now that gets pushed down through this hole till just a little bit of it is sticking out the bottom, and I'll hold that in place with some CA. And with that little job done, I do believe it's time for trucks and couplers. I find it's almost always easier to put the couplers on first. And for this car, I'm going to use some KD number 5s, which are a drop-in replacement for the little plastic couplers that come with this kit. Put the centering spring box on there first, and then holding it in place with the trip pin, put it right on there. I'm going to use the stock coupler box cover. Anyway, just drop the screw in there. Again, this is the hardware that came with the Roundhouse kit. Nothing wrong with it, I might as well use it. Tighten it down, then back it off about a quarter turn so it springs back into place. If that bright, shiny screw bothers you, do what I do and just paint it. I am using the HO trucks from the kit, but before I put them on, I want to dry brush a little age onto them here. Bring out some of that cast-in detail. Just using a little beige, a little gray mixed together. Get some of the other underbody detail here as well. I'll probably swap the wheels in this out for some metal KD wheels at some point. But for now, I think these will do. And again, I want to tighten that down and then back it off at a quarter of a turn so the trucks will swivel. I also like to clip the trip pins off of my couplers on most of the Thunder Mesa rolling stock. I don't use the magnetic uncouplers, and they're really not the right era with the MU. I guess those are supposed to represent MU hoses, but we wouldn't have those. Now, put the roof on without any further ado. Get a nice fit on that. And we'll do some light weathering next. I want to add the look of some road grime down here, along the bottom edge of the car. So I've got some terracotta chalk and some kind of flesh tone. Mix those together, make a dusty, rusty red, similar to the dirt on Thunder Mesa. Just kind of go along the bottom edge here. Mix a little yellow in there too, the paint color of the car. Don't want to overdo it. These cars should be in good repair, but they are out in the country every day, out in the desert, doing their thing, so they're going to get dirty. And the roof. Make that look a little bit sun-faded. Take some pure black and go right down the middle of the roof to represent soot from the locomotive. Soot happens. Pretty happy with that. I'll get a clear matte finish on that, and I think our car is done. Well, I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. It looks good there behind the porter. Unfortunately, all I can do is pose it on the layout at this time because, the Thunder Mesa Mining Company is still in multiple pieces and isn't running at the moment. But this is a nice new project to break in the new studio with. And I know it needs some passengers, and I'll be adding those pretty soon. Probably when I get around to building the rest of the cars for the Excursion train. Remember, this was just the prototype. and I'm probably going to build at least 4 more, but you know, don't quote me on that. For now, I think we're going to wrap this one up, and I want to thank you all so much for watching today. Thanks for joining me for this first build from the new studio. I had a lot of fun. Hope you did too. If you enjoy this kind of thing, I hope you will subscribe and hit that notification bell. It's absolutely free, and that way YouTube will let you know when the next video is coming from Thunder Mesa Studio. You can also follow over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and check out the resources available on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. As always, a huge shout out and thank you to our Patreon members who help to make these videos possible. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.